Welcome back to CTI Spotlight. I'm your host, Abbey Briscoe, and today we're here with director David Rogers for Man of La Mancha. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. So, we, the audience, who may not know what this show is about, would love to hear what the story is.
Wow. Well, the setup takes place in a 16th century prison where the playwright, the man Cervantes, who was a real-life playwright and novelist, gets thrown into prison because he's run afoul of the Spanish Inquisition. And so, as he's thrown into prison, now in the real Cervantes, there's not a whole lot known about his life. And he wrote all these plays that have now disappeared. We don't have most of them anymore, but he wrote this very famous book that's called Don Quixote, which every Spanish kid reads, and of course, once you get to Spanish, even in the United States, like level 3 or level 4, you're studying this book. It's very significant. In fact, it's considered one of the first novels, if not the first modern novel. Sales of this book are second only to the Bible in terms of international sales. That's how big this book is. And it really kind of changed how we view literature, the Canterbury Tales, Shakespeare, some of these things, the way that they told stories was influenced by this book. So anyway, but Cervantes, in the fictional version of him, in the musical, gets thrown into a prison. And he gets put on trial, not by the Inquisition, but by the other prisoners. And as part of his defense of why he's in prison, he decides to put on a play within a play. And so one of the cool things about this show is it's very theatrical. He looks around the prison and he uses the people and the things in the prison to help aid him in telling the story of this knight who is Don Quixote. Don Quixote, who is an elderly gentleman at the time, in his 50s, and has read all of these books about knights, which were no longer there at that time in Spain. They're about 200 years before that time. And he kind of goes senile a little bit and decides he's going to go on these quests as this knight. And so there's some very comedic things. Of course, the big thing everybody knows Don Quixote for is tilting with windmills, right? He thinks that there are these big enchanted ogres instead of being windmills, and so he gets his butt kicked by a windmill. But the interesting thing about this, and Shakespeare asked the question, what's in a name, right? You remember that? Mm-hmm. This musical really answers that question. And so Cervantes invites us into Don Quixote's imagination, into his life, by staging this play, this musical in the prison. And along the way, he pulls this character, this prisoner to be this character, or this object becomes this, or this thing. So everything on stage has a duality. And along the way, he meets this woman who is a serving wench. Her name is Aldonza, and he calls her, Aldonza is a very gruff name, and he calls her Dulcinea, which means the sweet one. And one of the dramatic arcs of this show is she wrestles with her self-identity. How can a person who has been downtrodden her whole life, what does he see in her that he could call her the sweet one and my lady fair, and that he could go off as a knight doing battle in her name? I don't know if you can imagine that, but
it's this internal struggle.
Very, very much so. And here's a woman who thought that she was really worth nothing, and just by the fact that he names her as his lady fair, she starts to change how she feels about herself. So that's the most important transformation in the show. Even though common everyday things we use, props become more than one meaning. There's a shaving basin that becomes a helmet, and lots of fun things that happen in that regard. But it's a very touching story in that regard, because what did Shakespeare say? Well, what's in a name? And I think in this show, a name is important. A name is how you identify yourself. A name helps, at least the way you label yourself, or even sometimes how someone else labels you, can affect your self-worth. So I've been doing a lot of talking, sorry. So what other questions do you have?
I was going to say, that's very powerful and a captivating story. I'm already just really wanting to see it. So this is a musical, and I was interested in the type of music that is performed in the show, and also how it enhances the story.
Well, so this show is fairly different than a lot of shows. First of all, this show actually started off as a television play, which is unusual. Most musicals start off as a movie or as a book or as another play. This started as a television play, and then they added, and it was very strong. It was very well written, and then they transformed it, I think, into the musical through a set of vignettes. And when you come to see this show is put together in these little kind of 4-minute scenes. That songs, scenes, dance segments, stage combat scenes, and they're all little escapades that Sancho and Don Quixote go on. And so some of them, you ask the question of the cast, is this a comedy or a drama? Well, yes, because some of them are very funny. Some of them are very dramatic. Some of them are reflections of life. So, like, one of the questions it raises is, and this doesn't answer your question yet, but one of the questions it raises, well, how do we treat people that are mentally ill, but that maybe aren't harmful?
Yeah. There's
a great quote from the padre, the father, in this, and the family is all concerned. Oh, what is everybody going to think about having a madman in the family? And the padre says, well, if we're going to cure him, let's make sure that the cure is not worse than the disease.
I love that.
That's a big theme, another big theme for the show. But musically, this show was put together. It's the only show that I know of that uses the Spanish flamenco guitar, and so you'll hear a lot of guitar rhythms. And in West Side Story, there's what I call the America rhythm. The I like to be in America, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and that's throughout this entire show. It's written in lots of, in musical terms, we call it a mixed meter, where very, 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 very often we change the stress of the beats, and so it sounds very flamenco, very Spanish, and some of them are in 10s and 7s, and these odd combinations of rhythms and beats. So besides that, and then the guitar, it's got a very flamenco, very Spanish dancey kind of underscore to it. And that's one of the reasons I think the show's not done very often, is it requires a very skilled guitarist, very skilled, and they play through the entire show.
Wow.
Yes, and there's actually numbers on stage where the guitar is played as part of the show as well too. So it's interesting that the music, of course, the story is Spanish, and the music is very, very Spanish, and it instantly takes us to a certain time and place because of what you hear. There's lots of really great trumpet parts in this as well too. The overture starts off with these wonderful trumpet fanfares that are just, they really get your attention and bring you into the story, and the opening number feels like this safari adventure. You want to go riding horses out in the middle of the desert, kind of Lawrence of Arabia kind of thing. So the score is very, very exciting, and it's very fun to sing. And then the big song, The Impossible Dream, that's the one that Don Quixote sings, and it sings it about halfway, a little bit more than halfway in the show. And that's a quest song, but not the type of quest you would think of. Normally people think of a quest as I'm going to go out and battle something, and in this, he's talking about the internal quest he has, which is to be the best he can be, to reach the unreachable star, to fight the unbeatable foe. And he tells Dulcinea, Aldonza, that it doesn't matter whether he wins or loses. It's more important that he goes on the quest, because then he learns more of who he is. See, now I'm almost crying as it is.
Yes, you're making me cry.
So anyway, I don't know if you can tell, but I've been preparing the show for a long time, and it's one of the shows I've always wanted to do. I've seen it done several times, and it's also a show for adults. It's got very adult themes in it, so things that I think any person who's had to deal with mental illness, or that's had a family member, or a person that's struggled with self-identity or self-esteem.
Very common things to today's world.
Absolutely. And I think this goes to show how enduring and how insightful that Cervantes was as a playwright, like Shakespeare or Moliere. Why do we keep doing these people's plays? Because they had insight. Mozart operas, they had insight as to, what it was it mean to be human.
Yeah, love that. Well, thank you so much, David, for sharing your insight and wisdom.
I talk too much.
No, I think everyone, at least including me, really enjoyed the show. So.
Well, can I say this before we go?
Yeah.
I have a phenomenal cast and crew. I could not have asked for better people to come and audition for the show. I've got funny people that are in funny roles, and I've got operatic people that are in operatic roles. And I think even just musically, the first night we got together and sang through, I was touched. I was moved to tears because of their talent and because of the way they were interpreting the songs. So thank you to my cast and crew for what you bring to the show.
Yes, and thank you for being here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you later.